I think everything's working. Fernando, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Matt.
All right. I'm glad that we're getting the technology to work. We've did so
Yes.
much of the score this way, and now the original podcast score for Blockbuster. It's out now as you're watching this, and it's amazing. I know you've been working so hard, Fernando. It's out
Yes.
now on Lakeshore Records. It's their first ever original podcast score. So that's huge. That's awesome. And so congratulations. That's
Thank you.
a really
And
cool
thank you to
thing.
Lakeshore. Thank you to Lakeshore for
Yes.
helping us making this happen. It's been very interesting also setting up, as you said, a soundtrack with live instruments in this time. And it was really fun to produce it.
We're going to listen to a few pieces of this, kind of talk through it a little bit. And obviously, please do go out, support, buy the album Blockbuster by Fernando Arroyo Lascarain. It's on Lakeshore Records. I love the opening. It's so sparse, but it gives that kind of character, diving down in the submersible. It's very aquatic.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea was... Yeah,
Go ahead.
The idea was to take some of the kind of sounds that James Horner creates with a lot of pianos and, a lot of different bell-sounding instruments, but turn it into our own way and kind of just build to that big moment of the Titanic reveal,
Yep.
really make that mysterious sort of opening.
And then we have that here. This is kind of the moment of seeing it for the first time.
And we hint at James's theme for the first time.
And then it rolls right into, the action. Love this. And it's so interesting because I think, when we sat together, and this will kind of roll into the next track here as we're talking, but I remember sitting with you, we were going through different theme options, and I think that what became the main theme kind of was a B theme originally.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear I think coming up here soon is the kind of main theme that we first played on the piano, or that you see. I'm trying to take credit for it. That you first played on the piano. That we really worked out to try to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just a take on that theme, and it was sort of transforming James's theme into something more adventurous. It was also similar to what happened on the on, not to be Sam like John Williams, because I'm very far from it, but what happened with Raiders of the Lost Ark, that he had two themes, and then we ended up deciding to make them into like the two different yeah, and then eventually both became like themes of their own, but somewhat interchangeable at times as well.
And that little track we just heard was the start of kind of James and Gail and him making new relationships at New World Pictures. This track was it was the first one that I think you did something purposely different than kind of the main James theme. And this came to represent something as the season progressed, but this kind of sound was almost like the sound of discovery.
Yes. We hear it a few times, similar things. We hear it especially when James starts actually getting interested into diving into the Titanic and starts pitching the idea of that film. We hear it also when he takes his scuba lessons. There's the same, it's not exactly the same, but there's the same quality of the music. And the idea was this, to tap into his explorer side and his scientific and curious side.
Now, what was your thought we hear voices here in the music too, the chorus, the choral vocals. What made you think that was something that felt at home here?
I kind of like this idea of children's choir representing. There's this otherworldly sense, but also a sense of innocence, and I think this is also James going back into his more uh, or into his innocent side of being like, oh, this is why I got into filmmaking, to create these moments, and you know, and I think there's something very genuine and just sort of nostalgic about using them.
I like that this is a piece of music also. I mean, obviously it's scoring the story, but the way that the music works in our series is different in a lot of ways from the way it works in film because it's not as clear. I mean, we still have to tell a story in audio, so it's not as simple as here's a picture. Now let's find music that plays against it or with it. It's an issue of you have to make space and have music that's emotional while hearing other things that advance the story. So
Exactly.
it has to work kind of hand in hand like that. And I thought there, when the music gets really sparse again, it's kind of like that little seed of the idea that sticks with them.
Yes.
So I like the idea. Oh, and here's the main theme that we use for James throughout the series.
Yeah, this is the first time we hear the main theme more developed, and it actually develops a little bit into parents' theme, which is the theme that happens here with the flute and the piano. This is the parents' theme, and in this scene, this is the big bike scene that a lot of people.
Yeah, the whole hot air balloon.
Exactly, the whole air balloon, and the idea was playing both between those themes of the parents and James's theme, and kind of go through that whole again, the innocence of childhood, where we see things grander than, like larger than life. So every single moment feels very adventurous and just, hopefully like a great childish fun.
What are these? The way I describe it in my bad music vocabulary is it's almost like a twinkly sound that's coming in here. It's like a celeste or something like that. Is that what we're hearing here?
Well, it's a combination of flute, violins, there is a piano there, and a celeste, I think.
Okay.
But the idea is to have, it's the woodwinds in general, but the idea was to have that sense of, like a child playing,
Yep.
And here that starts getting a little bit more serious, that they start planning, the balloon actually is saying, oh, let's grab this, let's grab that, and
It's
James is
clearly
sort of
building to
guiding
something.
The team, yeah.
And I love this piece because it does so many different things. This feels like this is where that intro music build up to. So like this is the moment where it starts to become something, and then it changes again here.
Yeah, this is the parents' theme, or the theme mainly of James and his dad, and it's the first time we're hearing a more like exciting way, because this is where James talks. Well, in the narration, you talk about his dad being always encouraging him to be more into the sciences and everything. This little motif is like his little brother. It's just.
And then here's kind of the misdirection coming up here, because this is this feels like he accomplished something, and then we have this final kind of piece right here where it feels kind of soaring.
Yes.
And then it developed. I mean, anyone, I guess we can say this, there's no spoilers. Anyone listening to this will have heard the series, but I love how it's cut off here, and then you immediately have that sense of things just took a turn.
Yeah. First we have we're gonna hear James's melody for the first time actually fully played right here actually, and it's when the balloon takes off, and that I think is a big moment for James, that he realizes what he can achieve.
Yeah, I love this. This is beautiful. Ah, the brass.
Yeah.
I love it.
Those horns. The horns are fun.
And then I like how this interruption just bursts into that energetic, we talked about it's like the E.T. bicycle music. There's that great music from E.T. that we're kind of, this is the same era, so we're channeling that a little bit.
Totally channeling it. I mean, if you do film music, you're also trying to do John Williams music, even when you don't. So, might as well go for it and channel it in this.
And that's kind of the point of what we're doing too, is, we want to be quoting and referencing some of those things. So things are written, on purpose, not to sound like John Williams, but to actually channel a little bit of that energy and celebrate it.
Exactly.
And I love this. And Peter really brought out, I think, the scene, just the kind of clicking of the bicycle gears really kind of completes the effect, I think, of this.
What really gave me a lot of ideas throughout this score was precisely that. Just Peter's sound design and the voice actors, it immediately sort of dictated the energy that the music needed to have. It was no different in that way than scoring a film. That when you see the image, in this case, when you hear the image as, as contradictory as that sounds, it immediately gives you an idea and say, oh, this is what it needs to be.
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh,
so this is
track.
Yeah, I love this one.
This track, originally I wasn't thinking of having it on the score, on the soundtrack, but a few people wanted to hear the nightmare sequence, how it played out on its own. And it's funny because for me, I like writing this type of sequences. And it was interesting that a lot of people reacted so much to it, because I guess with Peter's sound design, again, it was so evocative. And I think a lot of us have had weird dreams like this, that you feel like you're either being attacked or a hero or whatever, and it feels surreal.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So we ended up including it in the soundtrack.
And I remember we went through, I wasn't sure whether we should even have music for this originally, because it was going to be such a weird, what do you do in a dream? And in the end, of course, it makes sense to have music, but in a dream, we're trying to build out this whole scene that takes place in a dream. And so there's a question of do you try to do that with eerie sound effects and just have it be weird and discomforting and whatever? But
which you did in the dream sequence, or I guess when they're drugged.
Yes. Yeah. In episode
There
9.
Which chose not to have music.
And I think that was the right place to probably do that, because that's a really out of body experience.
Exactly.
And, it's very hard to find kind of an emotional rhythm because it's so disjointed.
Yeah.
But
And
here I
also
felt like
Peter's
that
sound
tension
design.
really added a lot.
And also Peter's sound design was so brilliant in that as well. That
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate. I love having music, obviously, as a composer, but I'm a big advocate of telling people, I don't think this needs music.
Yep.
I think music should enhance, not just be there.
Totally. Yeah. I'm thinking after this one, we're going to skip ahead a couple tracks just so we can keep this fairly short. If you want to hear the rest of the tracks, go buy the album, please, and support music like this, because very few. Look, it says something. Lakeshore Records is the first original podcast score that they're releasing. Not many people are doing the kind of. I would venture to say no one is, but
well, I don't know,
because this is well, you're too humble, because this is amazing.
Thank you, man.
But yeah, I think that this is a really cool thing. So please go out, support it, and it's those little things that help this kind of art.
And it helps us make a third season and a fourth season and as many seasons as you guys want.
That's right. Okay, so I think we'll listen to this one and then skip ahead maybe to.
We'll listen to this one because I know this one you like.
I do like this one a lot. And so this is meeting Arnold, when James is meeting Arnold, and it's that first kind of hint at Arnold maybe being the Terminator, because he comes in to be to basically read for somebody else, for the Kyle Reese character, and then they both kind of have this thought of maybe this Terminator thing, and Arnold's a little hesitant at first, but I like how you hint at this, and then there's a track later when we do the Terminator 2 track that I think brings this into kind of the full-bodied, cinematic experience using a lot of the same sounds that you're building here. So there's a cool kind of way that you elevate all of that stuff as we get later into the story.
Yeah, and funny enough, the previous track, The Dream, I wrote it way after writing even this track. And then I decided to go back and include some little elements of this idea into that,
Yep. All right, I just skipped ahead to the Terminator 2 track. So this was interesting because, we have sections, we're covering 20 years in this series. So there's a lot of ground to cover and a lot of development throughout James' life over this period. And we're going from this guy who's basically doesn't know what he's doing as a truck driver to then kind of the first successes and then that building up into this biggest film of all time with Titanic. Terminator 2 is still a lot of people's favorite movie of all time, and it was kind of an afterthought. James wanted to kind of do other things, and then finally home video and TV totally blow up the original Terminator. And all of a sudden there's this big fan base and they want more of it. And it's interesting how those things used to be so staggered, where you could have a theatrical release that maybe wasn't that big of a hit, but then years later this could blow up and become something that makes a career. And this is kind of that moment where it's something James cared about so much before that was kind of disappointing to him that starts to actually pay off.
Yeah, it's very interesting because originally I think I had written still the same idea here, but a little bit more relaxed. And you said, no, let's go for it. This is a big moment for him.
Yep.
I said, okay, sure. And again, this is another one of those cues where what is interesting about this score, it's a very eclectic collection of music.
Yep.
And I tried to do my best to, throughout the series, to write a score that felt like it still belonged within the same series, even though we were exploring different styles of music and different periods in his life, because his films are the same.
Yep.
No two films of his sound the same in terms of the music either.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting to explore as well.
Even with the same composer, it's very different.
Oh, yeah.
When it's Jamie Horner. Yep. And this is this track is All In. And this is toward the, I guess, beginning to middle of Titanic.
Oh, this is the deep.
Oh, you're right. Right.
Yeah.
I'm getting confused with the episode title for episode 9. But yeah, this is from episode 8, the episode before when we're underwater, which I thought was a really cool episode. That was the episode I was most excited about from a thematic point of view, because I mean, how cool is it to basically tell an entire story underwater?
Oh yeah. And it's interesting. I chose this one track for this episode, even though we had some that had the more watery sounds and everything, and even some more of that scientific side that we talked about in the Sapping Worms section.
Yep.
But this episode, what I loved about it is that it's an episode that actually it had a couple of tracks that were longer, like this one, but the rest was all Peter, because that sound design was so fantastic. And like there's so much realism in not having music at points. And in this case, it was more them actually discovering the ship and for the first time, which is what we're building to in this track. But that episode, it was a fantastic episode, and it was great to kind of step back and really just treat the score there as a kind of accompanying Peter there, rather than taking over, because that's
another one of those things where we thought the sound is so strong, but there are certain parts of this where really, I always think of the music as being the emotion in a story, and I know that's overly simplistic in a lot of ways, but the music is the only part that's not literal. You're hearing something that isn't actually playing in that character's head, so it's got to represent something in their core or something that's happening.
Yeah.
I love this swell. It just gets so loud.
Yes.
But it's perfect because it's just that pressure building up.
And you know, it's funny because one of the challenges with actually creating the soundtrack as opposed to the score was because all of a sudden we had all these live instruments, and the strings especially were, you know, recorded 10 times the same violinist playing, actually 18 times, because first and second violinist, the viola, the cello, everything. And trying to create that effect of a live orchestra was actually challenging. So I spent quite a fair amount of time with Scott Michael Smith, the amazing mixer who's worked so many big things, and he's truly a huge talent, on trying to create that, you know, making it sound organic as if we were on a stage. On a scoring stage.
No, I love it. I love these strings. I know there's some parts of this, obviously, you know, we're producing this during coronavirus lockdowns. So it ends up being, I know there's some parts of this where you're a violinist, you do a lot of film scores, and are involved in recording the scoring sessions for a lot of different films. And so there are parts of this that are what, 6 or 12 versions of you basically playing each violin role to kind of give that fuller sound that you can only do with an orchestra.
Violin and viola in this case, even though I'm not a violist, but I borrowed one from a friend, and I have played viola in the past, but you know, gotta do it.
Yep.
So yeah, each score I ended up recording. I used 3 different violins with 4 different bows to make it sound like different violins. Same with the viola, I used like the 4 different bows, and ended up being 18 violins and 7 violas. So what is that? With 23, 20, oh God, I can't.
It's a lot of math.
25 times playing each track.
Yep. And this section here is kind of the, I think, is this James and Jamie Horner?
No, this is James. This is the end of episode 9 where James gives up his.
That's right.
Gives up, but this is kind of reminiscent to the James Horner theme, and it's also a hint at those kind of swells that come at the end of episode 10.
Yes, and then we're leading into our last track here, and then we'll wrap this up. Again, everyone listening and kind of following along with us, thanks for joining us for this. And this album is available now from Lakeshore Records. It's their first ever original podcast score. Please go out and support it, buy it, and it's a really, really fun piece of music that I'm so glad actually has a release on a label. It's super cool.
Yeah, it's very cool, I gotta say.
And then here we have that, it's Oscars night, and it's kind of this, for James, this vindication. And there's also, you know, like one of the most interesting things to me in this story is how people don't really know about the relationship between James and his parents, and especially his father. But it meant so much that even when there was this kind of strain between him and his dad on the way they viewed things, you know, he wants them at the Oscars with him, and thanks them in his speech. And there's kind of a cool moment there with all of the kind of tension melting away. And I don't know, that's why I thought that was kind of, you know, the heartbeat or the pulse that propelled James forward. And in talking with a lot of his friends, you know, they echoed this. And that's something nobody else has talked about, is how that really pushed him to try to, you know, go out and do something that was impossible. And and it took him several tries, but a lot of people think, you know, Titanic was as close as you can get to something that was that ambitious and done that well. And this is kind of the celebration of that. So I love the way this music, his speech kind of folds into this heartfelt moment. and then we have this kind of swell as we wrap up the entire series. And it's such beautiful music.
Oh, thank you, man. And you know, one thing that I really loved about James' story, and that you focus on his story with his dad, is that I feel like as artists, and a lot of people, not just artists, but a lot of people have, you know, imposter syndrome. And that's something that you touched a lot upon in this series. But the perseverance, and James really developed a great career, but it also came from that need to sort of show his dad that he was worth it, that his career was worth it. And I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to, because even whenever you write or create something, it's never good enough. You know, you always see little things that you want to improve, things that, and then there's those people that you truly admire, that you say, okay, I feel like I'm not there, and I feel like there's another level to reach. And you know, you have to have that humility. And even though James Cameron definitely is a character, you know, I think he does have that humility, and that's why he's an overachiever in many ways. He tries to do things larger than life, because I think he's always searching for that next step. And that's, to me, what really related him to a lot of artists.
I love how this music just soars, and there's this cool moment. It's the only time we break the music, and for this end section, and
we come back to the beginning. It's kind of a hint of how we started.
That's true. Yeah. And we hear James at the, you know, bottom of the ocean, as low as you can go, several years later, Mariana Trench, and then everything ambitious that came after. This piece here, where we just kind of burst into this galloping cadence, very Avatar.
We are
you can
talking
hear some of the
about
influence.
Yeah. And it's the main theme. It's the last time we hear the main title.
Yep.
Which is gonna be followed by finally James's theme in the biggest, biggest form we've heard. It's in the whole piece, and we flipped what was the big theme, which was the main theme, with this James's theme.
I love it.
Oh yeah, and we decided to make this very loud.
It calls for it. And it's such a beautiful ending too.
Well, thank you, man.
So amazing. Bravo.
Thank you.
Please go out. Definitely, go out, buy this. It's on Lakeshore Records, out now. Blockbuster, the story of James Cameron, Fernando Arroyo Lascarain. Thanks for sitting down, revisiting this stuff. It's only been, a month and a half or so since this whole thing released, but man, this music is so fantastic. So
thank you.
If you want to hear it without our obnoxious talking over it, please go out, buy the soundtrack.
Yeah. And I gotta say, getting to work on this podcast, even during the lockdowns, really kept me, sane for a lot of it. Because we were able to, focus on something, and then kind of trying to get the soundtrack together with live musicians and, mixing it and all of this. It was, was a big deal, but I think it's worth it. And I hope everybody enjoys it, and they get to revisit it. They get to revisit a little bit the story. Yeah.
Fernando, thank you so much for all your work on this. Again, the album is out now. It's on Lakeshore Records. The first ever original podcast score, which is pretty cool. So congratulations again. We got to do all the social media stuff. So Blockbuster Pod across all platforms pretty much. And then Fernando, I know Instagram's your main thing.
Yes. and it's Farroy, Farroy. And then I have a Twitter that I created
Pretty
because
recently.
because of podcast, because I wanted to reshare some of the things there and be able to reply to people that ask a few things about the music. And that is R Casono, and I'll spell that because it's in Basque, and it means creek sounds, which arroyo, it means creek. So I don't know
Okay.
why I thought that was interesting. And my part of my heritage is Basque. So it's
That's right. Yeah.
at R Casono, which is spelled ERREKASONO.
All right.
Hopefully that's not too complicated.
Yeah, we'll be if you follow Blockbuster
Yeah.
Pod, you'll get to it for sure.
Mhm.
And yeah, this has been really exciting. Thank you for going through
Thank
all of this
you.
stuff.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.